The mountains remembered Silas Boone even when no one else did. At dawn, the light crept over the ridgeline like a tired hand reaching for warmth, catching on frostbitten pines and the rough-hewn roof of his cabin. Smoke rose thin and unsure from the chimney, as if even the fire inside had learned to keep quiet. Silas stood at the door with a tin cup warming his palms, his breath fogging the cold air, his eyes fixed on a world that never asked him to stay and never left either. Up here, time moved differently. It slowed, thickened, settled into the bones. Silence wasn't empty. It was heavy, full of things he did not name anymore. He had learned to live inside that weight. Loss had taught him that. Winter had finished the lesson. By the time he heard footsteps on the frozen path, he thought they were another trick of memory. But the steps were real, slow, uneven, determined. Margaret Hale climbed toward the cabin with the kind of patience only long years could teach. Her boots were worn thin at the heels. Her coat mended so many times the original cloth had all but disappeared. In one hand, she carried a dented pot, blackened from too many fires. In the other, a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Recipes written in a careful hand, edges soft from being unfolded again and again. Proof, if proof were needed, that she had once been useful. Behind her, the town of Red Willow lay quiet but not kind. Its voices followed her even up the mountain. Too old, too slow, can't keep up anymore. She had heard those words that morning, spoken plainly across a counter she had scrubbed for years. Half-pay slid toward her. No apology, just a shrug and a look that slid past her face, already forgetting her. So she climbed. When Silas opened the door wider, his eyes narrowed, not in anger, but caution. A lifetime of being alone teaches a man to question anything that arrives uninvited. "I heard you might need a cook," Maggie said. Her voice was steady, though her legs trembled beneath her skirts. "Just for today." Silas looked past her, down the mountain, as if expecting someone else to appear. Someone younger, stronger, someone who made sense. "I don't keep folks long," he said at last. "I hired you just for today. Leave by tomorrow." The words were plain, unsoftened. Not cruel, but final. Maggie nodded once. She had learned not to argue with the weather or men like him. "That's all I ask." Snow drifted between them, slow and quiet, settling into the spaces neither filled. Then Silas stepped aside. Inside, the cabin was spare. One table, 2 chairs, a narrow bed, shelves lined with tools and jars. The air smelled of iron, pine, and something lonelier than smoke. Maggie set down her pot and went to work without asking where anything was. Her body remembered what her pride would not allow her to say. She peeled onions with careful hands. Chopped roots she brought from town. Mixed dough in a cracked bowl, humming so softly it barely disturbed the air. The fire brightened under her tending, flames lifting as if relieved to be noticed. Silas watched from the corner, pretending not to. He told himself it was only curiosity. But there was something unsettling about the way she moved. Unrushed, certain, as if this small space already knew her. She fixed a loose hinge on the cupboard, mended a tear in the curtain with thread pulled from her own sleeve. When a chair wobbled, she slid a sliver of wood beneath one leg, steadying it without comment. No one had done that for him before. When Deputy Frank Lyle rode up in the afternoon, his horse stamping impatiently in the snow, Maggie's shoulders tightened. She kept stirring the pot. "Well now," Frank said, glancing at her. "Didn't expect to see you here, Maggie. Thought town had finally caught up to your age." Silas said nothing. He stood near the door, hands clenched at his sides. "Winter'll finish you off if you're not careful," the deputy added lightly. "Some folks just don't know when to stop." Maggie did not turn. She kept stirring, slow and even, as if the pot required all her attention. Silence stretched. Frank smirked, tipped his hat, and rode away. Only then did Maggie's hand pause. Supper was ready by nightfall. Stew rich with herbs, bread warm, and cracked just right. Silas tasted it and felt something loosen in his chest. A memory of evenings long gone, of warmth that had once belonged to him. They ate mostly in silence. Words felt too large for the table. Later, Maggie lay down near the stove, wrapped in a borrowed wool blanket. Silas lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the fire breathe. Tomorrow, he told himself. She goes tomorrow. But the cabin felt different already. The storm arrived before dawn, sudden and unforgiving, as if the mountain itself had decided to test what little mercy remained in the world. Wind hurled snow against the cabin walls, rattling the shutters like a fist demanding entry. Silas woke to the sound of splintering wood and the sharp hiss of the fire, struggling for breath. The roof groaned. Melted snow found its way through old seams, dripping onto the floor in steady, accusing taps. Maggie was already awake. She moved without panic, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders, sliding a pot beneath the leak, feeding the fire with practiced care. When a gust tore the door half open, Silas lunged to shut it, the force throwing him hard against the frame. Pain flared along his arm, bright and sudden. "Hold still," Maggie said, her voice calm as falling ash. She cleaned the cut with water warmed at the hearth, her hands steady despite the storm's roar. She tore a strip from her apron and bound the wound with gentle firmness. Silas watched her fingers, strong, scarred, unafraid, and felt something in him give way. No one had tended him like this since the world had gone quiet. "I buried my boy in a winter like this," Maggie said softly, not looking at him. "Cold doesn't ask who you are. It just takes what you leave unguarded." There was no plea in her words, no demand for sympathy, just truth laid down between them like kindling. By the time the storm eased, daylight pale and exhausted, hoofbeats sounded outside. Deputy Frank again, snow on his coat, judgment in his eyes. "Town decided," he said briskly. "She's done. Poorhouse is where she belongs." Maggie rose, already folding her blanket. Her hand shook now, just slightly. "I'll be gone," she said. "I don't want trouble." Silas felt the old instinct rise, the one that told him to step aside, to let the world take what it always did. For years, silence had been his shelter, but something inside him burned warmer than fear. He stepped forward, placing himself between Maggie and the door. His voice came rough and used. "She stays." Frank laughed. "Since when do mountain men play savior?" Silas met his gaze, unflinching. "Since I learned the difference between charity and need." "I need her." The word surprised them both. Snow drifted in through the open door, settling on the floor like ash after a fire. Frank muttered something under his breath, then turned away, boots crunching back toward the trail. When the door closed, the cabin held its breath. Maggie's knees gave way. She sat heavily, tears falling not in sobs, but slow and silent, like the thaw of frozen ground. Silas poured coffee and placed it in her hands. He sat across from her, close enough now to feel the warmth they shared. Outside, the mountain stood unchanged. Inside, something had shifted. Silas thought of all the things he had lost, and all the things he had refused to see. Maggie wiped her eyes and managed a small, astonished smile. "Guess I won't be leaving tomorrow," she said. He nodded. "No," he said softly, "you won't. And if you're listening to this, remember, worth does not fade with time. Sometimes the hands we almost turn away are the ones that save us. Sometimes belonging arrives quietly, asking only to be seen.